So good afternoon. I want to welcome you to Funding Verbal Verification of Employment Training, Funding VVOE. My name is Mindi Bartely. I'm the Eastern Regional Processing Training Manager. We are going to be going through the process on how to handle the VVOE control panel and also which documents you are allowed to use for your Funding Verbal VVOE. Before we get started, I wanted to explain where to locate your resource materials. They are available to everyone in the PRMG Resource Center. You're going to access them here through the Resource Center forms for retail. And once that page loads, we're going to go ahead and just do Control F on our keyboard and type in the search word search number, actually 127. Which is our Plantation Fulfillment Center's number. You can click right here on our Plantation Fulfillment Center 127 link. And if you scroll toward the bottom of the first page, you'll notice there are some new options here for VVOE funding procedures. There are two options here for branches approved to complete funding VVOE, which should be everyone on this call. And then there's a different process for branches not approved to complete funding VVOE. Okay, so this was the old procedure down here, the third option. We're going to go into the funding procedures link. And it's set up more as a Q&A type of format. But basically, I just want to go through this with you so we're all on the same page. Which branches are allowed to complete their own VVOEs for funding? Well, basically, it's the branches that have been identified with a dedicated underwriter and/or closer, or if you were a branch that was already approved by myself, Beth, or Brian Rishi to be able to complete your own funding verbal VVOEs. Please keep in mind, only operations employees are allowed to complete your funding VVOEs for your branch. So that's going to be your branch managers, your openers, junior processors, lead processors, ops managers, okay, are all eligible to do the funding VVOE. Any sales staff is not eligible to complete the funding VVOE for a file. So the sales staff that are not included, okay, the sales staff that are not allowed to complete these include branch sales manager. So if you're a branch sales manager, you are not eligible to complete. You're a marketing assistant, you're not eligible to complete. Obviously, loan officers, not eligible to complete. Loans eligible for completing the funding verbal VVOEs start with closing orders that are submitted on or after your branch approval date. So almost everybody on this call should have already been approved. If you're not sure of when your branch approval date was, or if you're ready to go, you know what your start date is, please reach out to me after class and I'll be happy to assist you with that. Where do I go to complete my VVOE for funding? Well, I'm going to show you. So here's our test file for VVOE America. You can access the VVOE control panel from the Forms tab over here on the left. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. Make sure you have your show in alpha order and show all boxes checked down here at the bottom of that Forms column. And you can click right here on that VVOE control panel. It's going to bring you into a page that looks like this. You're going to go to your first available one. You've got 8 available options here. You'll go to VVOE 1 and open it up. And this is your blank form. Looks like so. Now, you can go ahead and populate your borrower's information by choosing Borrower Employer 1. And it will go ahead and populate in your borrower's information here. Okay? Something to keep in mind, if you have 2 separate borrowers on 2 separate loan applications, then you need to make sure you go into the additional borrower application separately, go to the next available VVOE, and make sure that you are choosing Borrower Employer 1 again, because remember, the secondary borrower on the second application would be considered a borrower, not a co-borrower, as listed over here on the right. And then it will go ahead and populate in your secondary borrower's information. You would only choose the co-borrower tab if you had a situation where you had two people on a joint application. Then the second party would be considered a co-borrower. Now, if you have a third-party vendor, so let's say your employer is hooked up with a third-party vendor, meaning you can go in and order your VVOE via electronically. Could be through the work number, Thomas and Company, CC Verified, there's any number of those types of third-party vendors out there. So then you would go ahead and click the TPV box here, and it's going to give you some additional options to complete. So you're going to go ahead and complete the employer contact name and title. That's who you talk to. Now it's a third-party vendor. So instead, you can just type in whoever your third-party vendor was. Let's say it's the work number. Do the same thing down here. Then it's going to ask you for a TPV date and a TPV expiration date. So let's talk about that for a minute. I'm going to pull up a sample work number verification. Your TPV date, what they're talking about is your current as of date. So you actually have a couple of different dates here on your work number or your other third-party verifier. You're going to have the date that the VVOE was pulled on, which is your verified on date, and then you'll also have a current as of date, which isn't necessarily match the verified on date. The current as of date is the last known date that the information was current or verified with the third-party vendor from the employer. So in our example here, the current as of date is October 11. That's the last known date that the information was verified with the third-party vendor from the employer. In this case, it was Boeing. So that's the date I would put there for my TPV. And then you'll notice the TPV expiration date, which is 35 days, will auto-calculate once you put in the original TPV date. Now, the verified on date, that's the date that you pull the actual verification. That's the date that will come down here in the verifier information for the date that you verified. We're going to go ahead and finish completing the form. You need to verify, was the employer or business located independently of the borrower? So that's where your reverse search is going to come in. So if there is not a current one in the file, you do need to complete a current reverse. Very easy to do. You're just going to do a Google. So here's one for the Woodhouse Day Spa. You need to confirm that the address and the phone number match the one that is here in the employer section. Okay, and then are we going to say yes, the phone number was independently obtained, and how was it obtained? We obtained it in this case through the internet. Important to note, you need to make sure that you're not obtaining the information through the 1003 information or the borrower direct. Is the borrower currently employed at the company listed? So if I go back to my third-party verifier, we're just going to pretend this is for Woodhouse. This one's actually for Boeing. What we're looking for is the employment still active? And you obviously want to make sure that the job title matches up with what you have on the VVOE control panel as well. So are they currently employed? Yes, they are showing as active. What's my borrower's position? Does it match the information that I've been given? And then you can go ahead and plug in borrower start date, whatever that was. In this case, it was 10/14/96. Oop, plugging it in the wrong spot. Let's try this here. and then the probability of continued employment. So if it's a third-party verifier and that question is not answered on the form, you can just put against policy. Now, if you did not complete this form via third-party vendor, you would uncheck that box, and then you would need to make sure that you have completed these fields appropriately, not for a third-party vendor. Here, let me go ahead and switch over to Andy America here. So let's say Andy America was completed not through a third-party vendor. You're going to go ahead and plug in your employer contact name and title. So maybe you talk to HR, and let's say it was Emily Resource, okay? You would go ahead and leave these fields blank if they don't apply to you for the TPV, because you don't have a TPV. Let's say you're calling, okay? If you're calling an employee and verifying the information with the employer, then again, you need to make sure that you have verified the phone number you are calling is verified via reverse search. So in this case, it was Sunshine Ace Hardware. So we do the same thing. Make sure it's verifiable via third-party search. Here's my information there, okay? I called 262-2940. So here's my location. And then you want to make sure that you have, yes, we verified independently. We use the internet to identify our source. And then you're just going to call and ask these questions. Is the borrower currently employed with your company? Yes or no? Yes. Is the borrower active? Well, if they're employed, they're active. What is the borrower's current position? Okay, they're going to let you know what that is. Approximate start date and probability of continued employment. They can either say, yes, it's good. Hopefully they're not going to say no, but if they say no, you would need to mark that and in the comments, answer why. And then if they come back and say, no, I'm sorry, we can't answer that question, then you would put against policy. Okay. Then you are going to go ahead and put the date that you verified the information. Once you add the date here, it will auto-populate all of your information and a VVOE expiration date. So from the date that you call or pull the information from a third-party verifier, it's good for 10 days. Okay, let's go back to our little guide. All right, so we've talked about how to access the form. And these are all your screenshots, so you can refer back to those. We talked about how to complete the VVOE control panel when using a TPV or a third-party verifier. We talked about, do you have to complete a VVOE for part-time or second jobs? If you're using that part-time or second job income for qualifying, you do need to complete a VVOE for funding for each job that's being used for qualifying income. How do you gather the information? So there's a couple of different ways that you can gather the information to complete the VVOE control panel. You can use an existing written verification of employment that's been cleared by the underwriter, as long as it's still good for that 10-day period prior to the note date. So if you just obtained a written VOE, your underwriter just cleared it, and it's going to be still good through the note date, you can go ahead and use the information from that. I would just probably put a comment in the comment section here that you're using the WVOE. Again, I explained that it's very important to make sure that the employment status is showing active if you're using a third-party verifier, okay? And also when you're pulling your third-party verifier, make sure that you're pulling employment only. No income information needs to show there. If you pull one, a full one with income, then it's going to have to go back to the underwriter to be re-underwritten for income calculation, and you're not going to want to do that. If, as a last resort, your employer doesn't have a verifiable phone number or email, or there's just somewhere that they can't be reached easily, but they can be reached by fax, you can do a fax confirmation from them. And if you don't have it, let me know. I do have a VVOE fax cover sheet. If you use the fax, you're basically going to put on the fax cover sheet the information that's here and have them handwrite it and sign it and send it back. Okay, that fax number does need to tie back to the borrower's or to the employer's business though. You can do an email confirmation from the employer confirming the information on the VVOE form. So you could, if they can't do it by phone, but they have a business email, you can go ahead and email them these questions to answer. And they can, you can use that as well. Again, the email needs to be able to tie back to the employer direct. So if they have a website and there's email addresses listed there, corporate website and their email addresses are listed there, you could use that. Obviously, telephone confirmation is good. If it's an unpublished phone, for instance, in this example here, we use www.phonelookup.com. If it's showing as unpublished, then you do need to do an additional Google search on top of that for an additional third-party verification, just to make sure that number ties back to the business. You can use a cell phone number as long as that cell phone number is listed as part of the business number. Okay. What happens if your third-party verifier printout doesn't show the current information within 35 days? Sometimes this happens. Here's an example here where the current as of date came back from 12/27/2016, even though the verification was pulled in July of 2018. So this information that showed up on this particular TPV was not current. You can't use it if it's not current. So what do you do then? Well, you're going to have to get a hold of the employer and let them know that the third-party verifier system that they're using, or whatever it is, the work number in this case, that the information's outdated and you're unable to use it. Who do you talk to? I would say ask them, who can I talk to verify my borrower's employment? We talked about completing another 411 reverse search on the employer. Yes, you need to do it if it's not a current one. Or if the phone number doesn't match, you definitely have to do it. And then here's some recommended websites to use. Phone lookup or 411, or you could just do a Google search. Military. There is a very easy way to complete a VVOE for military borrower. There is a website here that you can go to, and it's going to look like this page here. Let me just pull it up real quick, just so you can see a little clearer what the website looks like. And as you can see from that form, it's a live link. So if you click on the link, it'll bring you right here. You're going to go to single record request, and then you're going to complete the information that's with red asterisk. Okay, so social, date of birth, last name. You're going to click the box for I'm not a robot. You're going to click the box for I accept. And then you can go ahead and hit the submit. Once you hit the submit, I'm going to go back to the screenshot so I can show you. Once you click on submit for the military, it'll bring you a status report, and it'll tell you if there's an active duty end date showing still serving, and if the status here shows yes, which is what you want to see. So this is the printout then that you would use to complete the VVOE for funding for your military. What do you do if the borrower position changed with the employer? Then you need to note it on the VVOE control panel, and you need to alert your underwriter of the change in employment position, and then your underwriter will let you know if there's something else that needs to be done. What do you do if the borrower is no longer employed? Then you need to alert the funder, closer, underwriter of the issue and wait for further instructions from ops regarding how to proceed. What information should appear on the 1003 page 1 employment section? This is very important. 1003 page 1, if your borrower is retired, it should have nothing in the employment section. I know a lot of times sales staff will put here retired, or they'll make notes for you. or sometimes I've seen it where it says housewife, or if they're a student, it'll say student here. There should be nothing here in these fields. If there's anything listed in these fields, when we get to closing and funding, the closers and or funders will not be able to move those funding milestones for you, because the system thinks because there's something typed in here, it thinks that it needs to look for a VVOE for funding. And then it's going to hard stop your closer or your funder. So make sure that this section here is blank. Do you have to complete a VVOE if the borrower's retired? So if the borrower's retired, all you have to do is come into the VVOE control panel. Okay, we're going to go into VVOE 3. We're going to do co-borrower 1 for Amy and just check the box for retired. That's all you have to do. If your borrower is self-employed, okay, then all you have to do is check the box for self-employed for that borrower. You'll notice it's going to open up some additional fields for self-employment. As a processor, the only thing you have to do is check the box. There's nothing further you need to do on your end. It's optional if the underwriter wants to complete these fields on their end. Okay, so we talked about that. How do I clear a VVOE condition in the Underwriting Conditions tab? So you're going to go into the E folder, into the Underwriting Conditions tab, and if you have a wage earner, you should have a 3220 income verbal VOE condition here. You just double click on it. You're going to mark it as fulfilled, received, and cleared. And that's how you're going to go ahead and clear your condition. Okay. You do need to make sure that you have one printed to the file. To print it, let's go back to Andy America. You're just going to go to print this VVOE. Now you only have to print the VVOE from the control panel if the borrower is not, I'm sorry, if the employer is not on a TPV, if they're not on a third-party verifier. If you're using a third-party verifier, you only have to complete the form, you don't have to print it, okay? Because you're going to actually print a copy of the third-party verifier form to the file. So if it's Doc Velocity, you can just do upload to Doc Velocity. If it's not DB, then you're probably going to print it to PDF and then drag and drop it into the E folder. So we're going to upload it to DB. It might help if I open DB. Hold on. I don't know if y'all realize there's a new Launch DB button here. You're just going to launch it. And double click it. Okay, now we're going to print it. So I'm going to wait for this to load so we can print it in there. It's going to print into document number 3220. And then you are going to status it green, ready to ship once it's in there. So now that we're clearing our own funding verbal VVOEs, we need to make sure that the final one that we do goes to the investor for shipping. We're going to upload to DB. It's going to ask me to go ahead and put it in the file. I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's labeled as 3220. And then I'm going to go ahead and status it green, ready to ship, and send it right into my DV file. And there's my verbal. So that's how it should look. Now again, if you're using a third-party verifier, you're not going to print this form into the file. You're going to print the third-party verifier form into the file. It goes into the same document number 3220. You would still have to complete the VVOE control panel. So now, so we talked about that. What do you do if your VVOE expires? You're going to have to do a new one, okay? Will another party review my VVOE for accuracy? Yes. So the investor is going to review the VVOE post-closing. All the information needs to be accurate. If it's inaccurate or insufficient, then the investor does have the option to suspend the file post-closing. You would be responsible for curing any investor suspense, obviously immediately, having to do with VVOE if they have a question. There are some options here. If you have questions regarding the VVOE procedure, you can reach out to any of us. Vanessa and Rena have been doing VVOEs for a long time for ops. Beth White's our processing supervisor. There's me. And then Kyra Spurgeon is the other processing trainer. You can also reach out to her for assistance as well. Right. I'm going to go